There are all these things going on. China's holding an empty can of gasoline, and our leaders are basically not saying or doing anything about it. It's not that they caused these problems, but they've exacerbated them and made them worse. That's violence in the streets with what they're doing and equipping some criminal gangs in the United States, what they're certainly doing in supporting and encouraging some of these extreme violent left-wing groups that are operating in America's streets. And of course, fentanyl poisoning. A lot of people think of that as something that the drug cartels are doing. The drug cartels are really the junior partners. It is really the Chinese that are the senior partners in that operation.
So they have like a direct link to each other.
Absolutely. So if you think about every link in this chain, the precursors, of course, we all know come from China. Those are the component parts of the fentanyl. They get shipped from China. They go to a port in Mexico called Manzanillo. 90% of the precursors go there. That port, that terminal is run by a Chinese company. They take those precursors, they send them up to a town in northern Mexico. It's got to be put together and made into fentanyl. There are 2,000 Chinese nationals in northern Mexico that are doing that. They live there and that's what they do. When they want to create the pills to put the fentanyl in, they use pill presses that the Chinese have provided them. Then the cartels, when they communicate with each other, they need secure communication. They're using Chinese apps and they're using Chinese devices because they know that the Chinese will not share those communications with the United States. And then finally, the laundering of all the drug money. In the cocaine days, the Mexican cartels used to do that in Latin American banks. Now they do it in Chinese state-owned banks.
Wow. So this is... it was a thing that I always, when the fentanyl really started getting bad, I was like, I don't understand why Mexico would be, I mean, I get it that for them, it's about the money. For Mexico, it's about the money. But I'm like, but if you're killing all of your customers, why would you, that's not a solid business model.
No, and that's a genius point that you're making, because on the face of it, it doesn't make sense because the cartels are doing that. Here's basically the trade-off. The cartels are helping kill their customers, but the profit margin for fentanyl is 8 to 10 times what it is for cocaine. So they're willing to suffer those casualties. Meanwhile, the senior partner, the Chinese, making money is great, but what they really want to do is kill Americans. And the crazy thing with fentanyl, it's not like heroin, it's not like cocaine. Most people that are dying from this poisoning don't even know they're taking fentanyl. They think they're taking a Vicodin, or it's some college kid who's, says, can I borrow an Adderall from a roommate to study for an exam? They take it and suddenly they're dead. It's now the leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 45.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And China's like, good. We want to kill Americans. This is how we're going to do it. So I want to. So you talk about the social justice movement as well, and China's involvement in that here in this country.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So it's on a couple of levels. First, if you look at a lot of the violent protests we had in 2020 with BLM and those issues, and the ones we're having now with sort of the pro-Hamas protests that we're seeing on the streets, there's two groups that are leading them. One's called PSL, the other one's FRSO. These are hard left groups that are aligned with China. They've sworn allegiance to China, to the CCP. In some cases, they have met with Chinese CCP officials. There are flows of funds. And so this is part of their effort to push extremes. A lot of people went out in 2020 to say, hey, we're concerned about how the police are interacting in the black community. Well, these groups went out and said, no, all cops are racist. We need to shut down all the police. And they have these violent protests. So they're doing it on that level. But then you look at a movement like the trans movement, which has grown up in the last 4 or 5 years, kind of emerged out of nowhere. Turns out that two of the biggest funders of that movement are actually Chinese billionaires. One of them is a guy named Roy Singham. He's an American who made his fortune selling his company to an investment firm partly owned by the Chinese government. He moved to China. He lives now in China. He's friends with CCP members. He, is invited to their events. He has these close ties. He's put $161 million into radical causes, a lot of that into the trans movement. The other one is a guy named Joe Tsai, who is one of the co-founders of Alibaba, which is the kind of Amazon of China. He's poured tens of millions of dollars into the trans cause. And here's the crazy part, Sarah. If they were true believers in that this was just something they were passionate about, you would expect them to be doing the same thing in China.
Exactly right.
But they're not. They're not.
Exactly
They're
right.
only doing it in the United States, even though I think anybody in that community would say the situation is far worse in China than it is in the United States. But they're not pushing the cause there.
Which, I mean, same goes for like TikTok.
Yes.
Right. I mean, they don't allow all of this madness to go on in their own country. I mean, and you're looking at China and they're like, I'm not advocating for like their policies with their youth because obviously they go too far. But I mean, they're turning their young boys into machines, getting them ready for war. And we're just like celebrating our inclusion or something. So I mean, it's really scary when you look at what they're doing and how they're building up for success, and we just seem to be completely asleep at the wheel. Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah, no, they call it cognitive warfare, and they think that if you look at the future trajectory, things look better for China than for the United States. You've got TikTok, which is controlled by ByteDance, this Chinese company close to the CCP. I quote in the book extensively from Chinese propaganda experts who talk about how TikTok is the Trojan horse, that they have access to our kids. And what are they feeding our kids? Basically cotton candy, somebody in blue hair screaming on a street corner. That's basically what you're getting on TikTok, and our kids are getting that. ByteDance has an equivalent in China called Douyin. But you don't have blue hair screaming on the street. They're looking at science experiments, lessons in Chinese history, of course, distorted to the CCP version. It's a much more serious educational app. So they're giving us, our kids, cotton candy. They're giving their kids spinach, and they're very confident they're going to win the cognitive warfare going forward.
I mean, I'm a little bit nervous that they are going to win going forward. Yeah. And not to mention, Peter, you've done so much work on this particular subject as well. It's like, well, don't worry. It's not like we have a compromised president, right?
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Biden will handle it. He's not compromised by the CCP.
Yeah, he's compromised by the CCP. He's also, so quiet on the issue of fentanyl. He never, ever, ever wants to confront the Chinese of their involvement. When he meets with the Chinese officials, he says, well, I raise it, but no finger pointing.
Right.
Well, what I point out in the book is the Chinese gang leader, there's a gang called UBG, headed by a gang leader named Zhang Anlo, who also goes by the name White Wolf, right? If you're a gang leader, you have to have a name. White Wolf, that's the gang that set up the Sinaloa cartel and made them the kings of fentanyl in Mexico. Oh. He has a business partner who in 2017 gave the Bidens $5 million.
Oh my gosh.
So you literally have 1 degree of separation from the first family, the Biden family, to the fentanyl trade in Mexico. So does he really want to have a conversation about this? No, he does not.
Of course not.
And that's one of the reasons that I think that he is silent on that issue and silent on a lot of other things as well.
If you like this clip and you want to see the full episode, click here. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, come on, you know you do. Click here.